whispered hub. My name is Nadia, and I'm an 18-year-old girl from a tiny village called Muabsa in the rural countryside of Mozambique. Growing up, I only spoke my native language of Portuguese and the local tribal dialect of my family's clan. English was as foreign to me as life on another planet. That all changed when a volunteer organization called Seeds of Knowledge set up a little schoolhouse in our village a few years ago. They brought in teachers, books, and a big focus on teaching English to the children through an immersive approach. While many parents were hesitant about this strange new language, my mother recognized how important it could be for my future opportunities. Nadia, aprenda bem inglês. Abrirá portas para você, she insisted. Nadia, learn English well. It will open doors for you. So, at age 14, with 0 prior English skills, I walked through the bright blue doors of the schoolhouse and into Mrs. Jackson's beginner English class. I'll never forget her smiling with those perfect white teeth on the first day, as she said, "Hello, class. Can anyone tell me what hello means?" My friend Jose raised his hand tentatively. Hello? He spoke our national Portuguese, mixing with the melodic village dialect. Mrs. Jackson laughed. Close. Hello means greeting or way to say hi. Let's all practice. Hello, hello, hello. We echoed back in our chorus of adolescent voices. Halo, halo, halo. Thus began my journey into the strange new world of English. Those first few months were a bizarre struggle, as everything from the sounds to the intonations felt utterly foreign on my tongue. Why did the letters make such peculiar noises in combination? Today we're learning about the terrible th sound, Mrs. Jackson grimaced one day, writing bath and feather on the blackboard. It's a very difficult one for new learners. We all scrunched our faces, trying to form that raspy consonant combination. Bach, fever, I sputtered, completely mangling it at first. Mrs. Jackson came over and gently shaped my mouth positioning. No, like this. Thra, ath, tsh, ether. She patiently repeated it over and over until I could finally make that rumbling exhalation smoothly. Bazungu have such a weird language, I griped to Jose afterward, using the local slang word for white foreigners. He laughed and nodded in commiseration. But thanks to Mrs. Jackson's immersion approach, I could gradually start picking up words and phrases through constant repetition and context clues. She had us speaking only in English as much as possible, using motions, pictures, and object lessons to visually represent the meanings. What is this? She asked one day, holding up a bright red objeto, long and thin. We all looked around cluelessly until Jorge blurted, "Red thingy." Mrs. Jackson laughed again at his inventive description. Close. It's called a ruler. Can everyone repeat? Ruler? Ruler, ruler, we echoed, finally having a name to put to that object. Slowly, excruciatingly, vocabulary started sticking in my brain. At home, I drove my mother crazy, constantly peppering her with English words to test my knowledge. Mama, what is the English for Kadira? I quizzed her, pointing at the old wooden chair. She rolled her eyes. Nadia, you know I don't speak any English. Chair, Mama. It's called a chair. After mastering basic nouns and present tense verbs, we moved on to constructing full sentences and having simple conversations. Mrs. Jackson brought us through Constance call and response drills. Hi, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. And you? I'm well too, thank you. We practiced introductions, talking about our families, discussing our ages and favorite things. I got pretty good at the typical classroom basics. Hello, my name is Nadia. I'm 14 years old. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. My favorite color is green. But it was much harder once we left the classroom and I had to use my beginner English survival skills out in the real world. The first time, I went with Mrs. Jackson on a trip to the village mercado market to really put my vocabulary learning into practice. Bom dia, I greeted the fruit vendor, Mama Zainabo in Portuguese, instinctively when we arrived. But then I pivoted to my clumsy English. Good morning. Mama Zainabo looked utterly baffled by this strange greeting from me. She only spoke our local dialect, not a lick of English. Eh? Iranizungumzanini? She gestured in confusion, asking what language I was speaking. She's practicing her English with you today, Mrs. Jackson chimed in with a warm smile. Nadia, why don't you ask her how much the bananas cost? Okay. I took a deep breath. How much the bananas? I pointed tentatively at the big green bundle on the tabla. Mama Zainabo's eyes brightened in recognition, and she quickly named the price in our local tongue. I scrambled to try processing the number into English. She said, 15 medicals? I looked at Mrs. Jackson desperately for approval. Very good, she praised. Why don't you ask her if she has any mangoes? I turned back to Mama Zainabo. You have, mangoes? I made an exaggerated hand gesture, briefly miming the shape and size. Mango? Nain. She laughed heartily, picking up one of the yellow-red fruits and waving it at me. Yes, mango, I exclaimed triumphantly. We got through a few more giddy exchanges like this, like comical cross-language, improvisational comedy sketches. Did she have oranges? How much for the tomatoes? When were those eggs laid? The experience with Mama Zainabo only reinforced how immensely difficult, but also rewarding it was to stretch my beginner English skills out into the real world. Patient souls like her didn't mock my mistakes, but rather met me halfway with encouraging grins and gestures to bridge the language gap. Over and over again, I left interactions energized by the tiny victory of successfully communicating something new in English. From the mercado, I graduated to more advanced situational English at the village loggia, shop, cafe, and restaurant as my skills slowly grew. Ordering food or making purchases required new vocabulary, verb tenses, and specific communication strategies. Good morning, I said a little more confidently to Mr. Fahim behind the counter at the loggia one day. Good morning, he replied with an indulgent look, one of the few locals who spoke some English. What can I get for you today? I took a breath, mentally formulating the words before blurting out, Please, I want ... 3 ... loaves ... br ed. He cocked his head quizzically. not recognizing the strange new word I had invented through my literal Portuguese translation. 3 loaves? Sorry, I blushed, realizing my error. 3 pão, the round bread? I tried miming the rounded shape with my hands. Ah, you mean 3 loaves, Mr. Fahim exclaimed. Why didn't you say so? He chuckled lightly, retrieving the fresh bread from the big woven tray. 3 loaves, please, I repeated, committing the word to memory. And, 1 eggs? He stopped laughing and furrowed his brow, baffled again. 1 eggs? I huffed audibly, frustrated with myself. Careful, Nadia, I coached internally. Singular or plural? It's just 1, so eggs needs to be singular. Okay, 1 egg, I corrected carefully. Por favor. I threw in the Portuguese polite closing phrase for good measure. Mr. Fahim beamed. Excellent. 1 egg and 3 loaves, coming right up. As I waited, I noticed a tattered cardboard sign posted behind the counter, clearly made by a child learning English. How may I? Underneath were 3 little drawings. One of an elderly smiling face, one of a young girl with pigtails, and one of a muscular man flexing. Next to each picture were the corresponding phrases. Help you, ma'am. Help you, miss. Help you, sir. I smiled, recognizing the classic customer service line and how the maker had differentiated it based on whether the customer was an older woman, young girl, or male. Very clever. Ah, I see you noticed our little English practice sign, Mr. Fahim remarked, as he carefully placed my bread and egg in a paper basket. My nephew made that a few years ago when he started learning at the Seeds of Knowledge school. It's muito bom, I complimented in Portuguese. Very helpful. He looked impressed that I knew the English word for helpful. Why don't you practice the line then, miss? He gestured towards the sign with an encouraging dad. I grinned, pleasantly surprised by his invitation to take this little role-playing exercise. Channeling the spirit of a shopkeeper, I stood up straighter and asked in my best polished English, How may I help you, sir? Well done, Mr. Fahim laughed delightedly. Your English is getting muito bem. That will be 25 medicals total, please. I pulled out the wrinkled blue notes from the little pocket I had stitched into my well-worn chitenge. The colorfully patterned wrap I wore over my dress daily. Counting out the amount carefully, I stated, 25 medicals. After receiving my proper change from the transaction, I gave Mr. Fahim a little wave. Obrigada. Thank you. You're welcome. Bom dia, he called back with a warm smile as I headed out onto the dusty village path, feeling doubly pleased with my successful English communication. From shops, my confidence expanded to holding basic conversations at the local cafe and restaurant over the next couple of years. When Mrs. Jackman's volunteer service ended after 2 years, we were all heartbroken to see her go. But a newly hired local English teacher, Miss Emma, took over to continue our immersion lessons. Don't worry, we'll keep practicing your English every day until it's conversational, Miss Emma assured us on her first day, clearly nervous, but determined. Cafe encounters pushed my skills in giving preferences and making polite requests. One morning, I decided to try out a solo English order at the counter of our village's humble Cafe Uhuru. "Good morning," I said to the man behind the counter. He looked at me blankly, not comprehending my English greeting. I tried again. "Bon gin?" Now completely mangling the Portuguese version too. He simply blinked slowly. "Off to a great start, Nadia," I grimaced internally. Undeterred, I pressed on. "I would like 1 coffee, please," I carefully enunciated, holding up a single finger to illustrate the you-know-one. The man's eyes brightened in recognition, and he rapidly answered back in our local dialect about what coffee roast, size, or milk I wanted. I froze like a gazelle in the headlights. Incapable of comprehending his barrage of unfamiliar words, I held up a single finger again and struggled out. "Just 1 coffee, please." He seemed to finally understand the simplicity I needed and turned to prepare a basic cup. While waiting, I noticed Miss Emma's English classroom sign taped up behind the counter. "What kind of would you like?" I scanned the phrases, trying to commit them to memory for next time. Having learned from my mistake, I was ready when he turned back and rapidly asked something like, "¿Qué tipo de algo?" I looked at the sign again, then replied, "¿Qué tipo de coffee?" He beamed as if I was a toddler and proudly repeated, "Preto, black coffee." I nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Preto coffee, please," hoping I would remember that useful phrase. After paying with the last of my carefully husbanded medicals, I took my little cup of thick, syrupy black coffee and settled at a rickety table. Feeling quite proud of myself, I took an overwrought sip and immediately puckered, burning my tongue on the molten liquid. "Ah!" I gasped, barely stopping myself from spitting it out. The bitter, gravelly taste was absolutely repulsive compared to the sweet, milky coffee I was used to at home. Of course, I had forgotten to ask for milk and sugar. Trying not to make too much of a face, I forced myself to take another tiny sip of the sludgy black brew. Just then, Miss Emma appeared like a linguistics angel. "Nadia, I saw you come in. Practicing your English, I hope." She slid into the vacant seat across from me. Yes. I quickly corrected myself. I ordered coffee. I pushed the cup towards her with a sheepish look. Miss Emma laughed lightly, but not the way you like it, I can tell. "Here, let me help you." She waved over one of the servers. "Excuse me, could we get some ashukara late for the coffee, please?" The woman behind the counter answered something in our local dialect that I didn't comprehend, but Miss Emma responded back with a reassuring head nod. Within moments, she had retrieved a little metal pitcher of hot milk and a ceramic cup filled with golden brown sugar cubes. "There, that's better," Miss Emma declared, after doctoring up my coffee with a generous pour of milk and 3 lumps of sugar. She slid it back across to me. "Give that a try." I took a big, relieved gulp. The coffee was now transformed into the rich, creamy, slightly sweetened beverage I was accustomed to. I smiled hugely at my teacher. "Muito obrigada, Miss Emma." "You're very welcome, Nadia," she replied. "But in the future, You should practice asking for milk and sugar when you order. Can you repeat after me? I would like. I echoed obediently. My coffee, Miss Ema continued. My coffee? With milk and sugar, please, she finished. With milk and sugar, please, I repeated carefully, committing the phrase to memory. Having a teacher like Miss Ema, who could gently correct me and provide context alongside new vocabulary, was invaluable. Miss Ema rewarded me with a warm smile of approval. Muito bem. Next time, just say that full sentence when ordering your coffee. We proceeded to have a whole dialogue practice session right there at the cafe table, with her quizzing me on different phrases and me struggling to respond. How did I take my tea? With just milk, no sugar. Did I want anything else, like a bread or egg? What about a cold drink instead? By the time I finally bid her adieu and headed off that morning, my head was swimming with all the new vocab and grammar constructions. But I felt a tiny wealth of pride for having successfully navigated an almost fully English conversation, even with Miss Ema's assistance. Over the next couple of years, I diligently kept trying to put my hard-earned English skills into practice at every opportunity. Whether it was buying fruits and veggies from local farm vendors, ordering sporadic meals at the village restaurant, or making random chit-chat with the few Mozambicans who knew enough English to entertain my attempts. The restaurant became my biggest arena for challenging myself, as I endeavored to politely place detailed orders, make special requests, and engage in discourse about the food and service. With each successive visit, my confidence grew just a little bit more. Good evening. Welcome to Restaurant Zambizia. The host greeted me one evening with a genuine English attempt. He was a younger man who had also gone through the Seeds of Knowledge program and seemed to recognize me. I stood up taller, pushing my shoulders back in an aura of poise. Good evening. Table for one, please. The host raised his eyebrows in surprise, but quickly composed himself, gesturing to one of the small, linen-topped tables near the window. As I settled into the chair, he handed me a battered menu. Your server will be right with you, miss. Thank you, I replied graciously, touched by his use of the English honorific. Glancing around, I could see the usual array of Portuguese chalkboard specials and handwritten signs papering the walls. But I also noticed some new English vocabulary charts had been taped up, clearly aimed at helping the staff learn more phrases. Smart. Within moments, a young woman in a bright print chitenge appeared at my table. Boa noite. My name is Amina, and I will be your server this evening, she announced in impressive English, if still deeply accented. I decided to push my skills to the limit and respond fully in kind. Good evening, Amina. It's nice to meet you, I replied politely in English, with a little self-conscious dip of my head. Amina's eyes widened slightly at my response in her second language, but she recovered quickly with a broad smile. It's nice to meet you too. Can I start you off with something to drink this evening? I scrambled to recall the relevant beverage vocabulary as I glanced at the tattered drink menu. Yes, please. I'll have a glass of your sweetened cha iced tea. One sweet iced tea, got it? Amina confirmed with a nod, her pencil scratching on her little order pad. And would you like to hear about our specials for this evening? Yes, please, I responded, feeling a tiny blossom of pride that I could understand and engage in this basic level of dining interaction. Amina launched into reciting what I assumed were the daily specials, but I could only comprehend about half of what she said. Something about a fish entree and chicken piri-piri. When she finally paused for breath, I decided to just own my limitations. Holding up a hand politely, I admitted, "I'm so sorry, but I didn't quite understand all of that. My English is still just a beginner level. Could you please repeat the specials? Mais despacio, por favor." I asked her to slow down at the end in Portuguese. Amina actually giggled, clearly not expecting a local village girl like me to be speaking any English at all. "You've got me there. Let me try again more slowly." She kindly went through the 2 special entrees again, enunciating carefully and using simpler phrasing. I was able to catch that it was grilled fish with coconut sauce and chicken in a spicy peri-peri sauce. I think I'll have the fish with coconut sauce, please, I decided after her helpful explanation. I knew enough about food vocabulary to picture that in my mind as something mild and familiar. Excellent choice. Amina scribbled more notes on her pad. "And would you like any sides with that? We have rice, papas." She trailed off, searching for the English word. I quickly racked my brain for the correct term and landed on chips? French fries, you mean? Yes, exactly. French fries are available, or the stiff corn porridge that goes so well with the fish, Amina affirmed, looking happily impressed with my culinary vocab. I decided to stick to what I knew and understood fully. "Just the fish and rice, please. No chips or porridge tonight." "Perfect. Got it." Amina made a final note. "Your iced tea and fish with rice and coconut sauce will be right out. Let me know if you need anything else in the meantime." With a little friendly parting gesture, she whisked off to place my order. I let out a deep exhale and settled back in my chair, thrilled that I had made it through that relatively complex restaurant transaction almost entirely in English. A far cry from my early days with Mrs. Jackson. As I waited for my meal, I decided to further challenge myself by reading through some of the vocabulary charts on the walls. One appeared to highlight different dietary preferences: vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, nut allergy, dairy allergy. I recognized vegetarian as the person who doesn't eat meat, and allergy, I knew, meant food sensitivity. I made a mental note to ask Miss Ema about the others at our next lesson. When Amina returned with a glass perspiration dewed with condensation, she noticed my gaze on the poster. I see you looking at our requirements vocabulario. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm still learning some of those myself." I gave an appreciative smile and decided to give it a try. "Well, I know what vegetarian means, but what is the vegan one?" "Good question." Amina's eyes lit up. A vegan is someone who doesn't eat any animal products at all. No meat, milk, eggs, cheese, anything from an animal. I repeated it back to certify my understanding. So, vegan is like vegetarian, but even more strict? I double-checked. Exactly, Amina praised. And what about gluten-free? Do you know that one? I furrowed my brow, trying to break down the unfamiliar term. Gluten free no. I don't think I know that word. Gluten is a protein that's found in wheat, barley, rye, basically any grains, Amina explained. So gluten-free means a diet without those grain products. Ah, I see. The meaning started to click into place. Like no bread or Papa's porridge? Precisely. Very good, Amina said approvingly. We get some tourists and clients who have gluten intolerance, so we try to have options for them. Just then, another server passed by, holding a large ceramic platter. The aroma of coconut, spices, and fresh fish made my mouth water instantly. Amina noticed me inhaling deeply and laughed. And speaking of your meal, it looks like the grilled fish is just about ready. 1 second. She flagged down the other server, who carefully set the steaming platter down in front of me. My eyes widened. This was no simple village food. The large white fish fillet was delicately arranged over a bed of turmeric-spiced yellow rice and drizzled with a fragrant reddish-orange coconut curry sauce. A garnish of fresh sliced cucumber, tomato, and shredded carrot added bright pops of color. This looks amazing, I said softly, struggling for the English word of praise. Thank you. Amina beamed at my appreciative reaction. You're so welcome. Let me know if you need anything else while you enjoy. Buon provecho. As she whisked away, I couldn't resist a celebratory fist pump under the table. Not only had I successfully navigated an intermediate-level English conversation, but I was about to dine on an utterly decadent restaurant meal that pushed my usual cuisine boundaries. This was true progress. I dug into the rich, fragrant dish with gusto. Flavors of warming spices, garlic, chili pepper, and that ubiquitous coconut milk danced over my tongue. The fish was flaky perfection. So fresh, it practically melted in my mouth. I alternated bites with the fluffy turmeric rice and refreshing bursts of cool vegetable to balance everything out. About halfway through, I had to pause. Licking my lips, I realized I needed something to drink besides the lingering ice in my tea glass. I watched and waited for Amina to circle back through the dining room. When she passed close, I gave a small wave to get her attention. Excuse me, Amina? Could I get a glass of agua, please? Water? Oh, of course. My apologies, she said, looking momentarily flustered for not noticing my empty cup earlier. Still or sparkling? I blinked, not comprehending her options. Normal water is fine. Just tap water? I tried to clarify. Sure thing. 1 regular agua coming right up, Amina replied, with a reassuring nod, before whisking off again. As I waited, sipping the last dregs of sweetened iced tea, I couldn't help but marvel at how incredible this whole dining experience was for me. Never could I have imagined, even just a couple of years ago, having such a multifaceted dialogue almost entirely in English discussing menu items, explaining preferences, and making special requests, all while being served a gourmet-level, Indian-inspired coconut curry dish that pushed my palate into deliciously unfamiliar territory. When Amina returned with a swirling condensation-frosted glass pitcher and refilled my cup, I made sure to express my gratitude. Muito obrigada, Amina. Everything has been wonderful. You're so welcome, she replied happily. Let me know if you need anything else at all. As she walked away, I couldn't resist practicing a couple more phrases quietly to myself. More water, please. May I have the check bill when you're ready? I was determined to complete this whole evening's dining journey through to the very end, using as much English as I possibly could. Maybe I would even ask Amina for a job application before leaving. A role like this, immersed in the language, could be invaluable practice for me. Either way, I knew my life had been forever changed by that pivotal decision to walk through those bright blue doors of the Seeds of Knowledge schoolhouse years ago. From stumbling through simple greetings and objects to haltingly constructing sentences and now engaging in back and forth conversation, my English abilities had blossomed. As I lingered over the last few bites of curry-drenched rice, I reflected on just how immensely valuable this unexpected language skill could be for my future. The world felt wide open. No longer was I confined to the boundaries of my tiny rural village. With perseverance and practice, perhaps I could become fluent enough to work as a translator, tourism guide, or even travel internationally one day. For tonight, though, I had one final challenge to tackle: requesting and paying the bill. I surveyed the room until I spotted Amina making her rounds again. With a deep breath, I raised my hand slightly to catch her eye. "Excuse me, Amina? Could I please have the kanta when you have a moment?" I patted my small purse clutch in a pantomime gesture to reinforce that I meant the bill. Amina gave me a quick thumbs up of comprehension before continuing on to another table. A few minutes later, she returned with a small paper booklet and placed it on the table in front of me. "Here's your kanta. Let me know if you need anything else." I opened the thin billfold to see the itemized charges all listed in medicals, our local currency. About 2/3 of the way down, I spotted the reassuring English word, total. I double-checked the total numeric amount listed, made sure I had enough medicals, then placed the proper amount, plus a little extra on the table for a tip. As Amina whisked by again, I gave a small wave to get her attention. "I've left the total amount on the table here. Thank you so much for the excellent service," I stated clearly, pushing the money politely across to her side. Amina's eyes widened in surprise and delight that I had conducted this final transaction completely in English. With an appreciative smile, she scooped up the payment. "You're so welcome. It was wonderful serving you this evening," she replied smoothly. "Please come back and visit us again soon." "I will, obrigada," I replied in a blend of both languages. With that, I gathered my small purse and shawl, pushed back from the table, and headed out into the descending evening. Strolling down the dirt path towards my home, I felt immensely proud of both my progress in English and in experiencing new cuisines outside my rural village norms. Over the next several months, I continually sought out opportunities to incorporate English conversations into my daily life in Muabsa. A simple stop for bread at the village loggia became a chance to pleasantly greet the shopkeeper, "Good morning," and inquire if they had any fresh eggs or cold drinks in stock that day. Picking up produce from Mama Zainabo's stall meant reviewing the names of fruits and vegetables to confirm I could rattle them off accurately. "Hello, Mama Zainabo. Could I please have 1 bundle of bananas, 4 tomatoes, and, what is sinura in English?" I would pause to double-check the word for carrot. The patient older woman would just laugh her deep belly laugh and say, "Car rot, Nadia. You learn quickly." I strived to insert English into every conversational interaction possible, no matter how strained or brief. Eventually, the incredible strangeness and difficulty of those early days with Mrs. Jackson began fading away. Speaking English to make even simple requests like, "I would like 2 loaves of bread, please," started feeling more natural with each utterance. My diligence began paying off in little ways. One afternoon, I was navigating the narrow dirt paths between homes and came across Miss Ema carrying empty tin buckets towards the village well. Instinctively, I called out in English, "Good day, Miss Ema. Do you need some help carrying those?" Miss Ema's head swiveled in surprise. Then her face broke into a proud grin. "Why, Nadia, your English is getting so good, and you're so kind to offer help." She paused to shift the heavy buckets to one arm. "Yes, I could actually use an extra set of hands if you have a moment." "Of course." I hurried over and relieved her of one of the buckets. The tin handle dug into my palm, reminding me just how strenuous a chore like hauling water could be. As we headed down the path towards the communal well, Miss Ema remarked, "I'm impressed you offered your help in English without even thinking about it. That's great progress." I felt a flush of pride at her praise. "Thank you, Miss Ema. I've been trying to practice as much as possible every day." "It shows," she affirmed. "Why don't you tell me what else you've been up to lately? Using as much English as you can." I took a breath, mentally sorting through how to construct a longer response in my second language. "Well, I have been helping more at home with cooking and cleaning for my family. My mother—" I paused, trying to remember the English word. Miss Ema gave me an encouraging nod. "Is very busy working at the machamba, the farm gardens. So I try to make the meals and tidy our small home." Miss Ema's eyebrows raised in surprise. "That's wonderful, Nadia. You're such a responsible young woman. Do you enjoy cooking?" I considered the question carefully. Enjoyed was not quite the right word, but it gave me satisfaction in its own way. "I will not say I enjoy it," I responded slowly, "but I feel proud to provide for my family and use our garden's fresh fruits and vegetables." "That's incredibly mature of you," Miss Ema said with a warm smile. "I can tell your English vocabulary about household tasks and foodstuffs has really grown." We arrived at the stone wellhead, where a line had already formed with other women and girls waiting to lower their buckets and draw up water. As we took our place in the queue, Miss Ema continued prompting me. What sorts of dishes do you typically cook? Tell me about some of your family's favorite meals. I racked my brain for the relevant culinary vocabulary as the line inched forward. Well, we eat muito, a lot of bean stews and dishes with fresh greens from the gardens. Oh, and dense porridge with peanut sauce. My youngest sibling loves that. Miss Ema chuckled. I can understand why a child would enjoy that nice, thick porridge. What about for you, though? What's your personal favorite? I considered, relishing the chance to really stop and think through this basic conversational back and forth in my second language. I think my favorite may be the fresh fish that my father sometimes catches from the river, grilled over an open fire with salt and just a squeeze of tart lime. I mimed the motions of sprinkling seasoning and squeezing out juice as I spoke. That does sound delicious, Miss Ema agreed. You're making me hungry just describing it. Finally, it was my turn at the wellhead. Moving with practiced expertise, I leaned over and lowered my empty bucket down into the deep stone cylinder until I heard the refreshing clunk of it hitting the surface of the underground reservoir. Using the looped rope, I pulled up the now full bucket hand over hand, muscles straining with the sheer weight of the water. As I carefully set it down and stretched out my arms, Miss Ema praised, "Well done, Nadia. Your English describing that whole process was excellent. I could picture every detail perfectly." Flushed with pride and exertion, I couldn't stop a huge grin from spreading across my face. Obrigada, Miss Ema. This practice of narrating my daily life out loud in English is muito helpful. Over the next few months, I made a concerted habit of narrating even the smallest, most mundane tasks throughout my day entirely in English. As I set the table for our family's evening meal, I would mutter under my breath, "Okay, 2 forks, 2 spoons, 2 knives, 1 plate for Papa, 1 plate for Mama, 1 for Casimiro." Sweeping the hard-packed dirt floor of our home's main room became dustpan, broom, sweeping, sweeping. Be sure to get all the crumbs in the corner. I must have sounded slightly unhinged at times, rambling to myself constantly in grammatically questionable English about housework and chores. I must have sounded slightly unhinged at times, rambling to myself constantly in grammatically questionable English about housework and chores. But I found the more I verbalized my thought process out loud in my second language, the easier it became to construct full sentences and retrieve relevant vocabulary. My favorite routine was describing the entire process of preparing one of our typical family meals from start to finish. As I laid out all the fresh produce and other ingredients, I would begin my English kitchen narrative. Okay, today I will be making a peanut stew with collard greens and sweet potatoes. First, I need to wash the vegetables. I'd continue murmuring details about rinsing the greens under the water basin, peeling the potatoes, chopping the onions and tomatoes, heating up the well-seasoned clay pot over the open fire pit. If I couldn't remember a particular word in English, I'd simply pause and make a mental note to ask Miss Ema, or try looking it up later. Now I am, mashing, crushing the peanuts into a powder to thicken the stew, I would say, as I used the heavy wooden mortar and pestle. Then I'd move on, adding the peanut powder and vegetable broth to the pot to simmer. By the time the whole bubbling clay pot was ready, with the bright greens gently wilting and the sweet potatoes growing tender, I would have verbalized the entire cooking process entirely in English from start to finish. On nights when the rest of my family was home to enjoy the meal together, I would even continue narrating as we ate around the low wooden table. This peanut stew is muito delicioso. Wouldn't you agree, Mama? I would pose in English, then listen as she replied in our native Portuguese. Sim, Nadia, esta bem bom, she would compliment with an approving nod. Unaware I was narrating our interaction. Mama says it is very good, I would echo out loud in English for my own benefit. I will have a second helping, por favor. My bemused siblings would just roll their eyes at their strange sister, conducting a one-sided English conversation at the dinner table. But my father always appreciated my diligence in practicing the language they recognized could be valuable for my future. Continua trabajando duro, Nadia, he would counsel with a proud paternal nod. Su inglés está mejorando cada día. I knew he meant, keep working hard. Your English is improving every day. The recognition from my usually stern ex-soldier father made all the peculiar self-narration worthwhile. One weekend afternoon, I was in the midst of narrating my laundry process as I leaned over the concrete trough, vigorously attacking our family's soiled shirts and wraps with the battered wooden plunger. Plunging, to agitate the soapy water and get these clothes clean, I muttered in a steady stream of English to myself. The stains are being stubborn today. I may need to go back and retreat by grating some of the pounded soap bark over the bad spots before scrubbing again. I barely noticed as a familiar figure approached and hovered nearby, valiantly trying to suppress her laughter. Finally, Miss Ema's amused voice cut through my laundry monologue. Well, I must say, Nadia, I've never heard someone give quite such a vivid English commentary while doing the wash before. I jerked in surprise, felt my cheeks burn as I straightened up from the trough. Oh, Miss Ema, I did not see you there, I exclaimed, sliding easily back into Portuguese in my embarrassment. She gave a reassuring wave of her hand, grinning. No, please continue. I was enjoying your creative narrative about laundry techniques. You've come so far in just being able to speak that many sentences. Miss Ema gave an encouraging nod. Please, go on with your laundry narration. Hearing you describe the processes so thoroughly in English is just wonderful. I felt another flush of self-conscious heat, but took a breath to continue. Okay. Where was I? Oh yes. If these tough stains do not come out, I may need to let the clothes soak overnight in the soapy trough before trying to scrub again tomorrow. Miss Ema listened intently, nodding along. When I finished, she beamed. Excellent work, Nadia. You incorporated so many precise verbs and details there. Your vocabulary has grown immensely. Buoyed by her praise, I straightened up from the trough with renewed energy. Thank you, Miss Emma. Constant narration is one of the techniques I've been using to push my English usage every day. Well, keep it up, she encouraged. Before you know it, that diligent practice will make English feel like your second mother tongue. Maybe you could even tutor some of the younger students one day. My eyes widened at the thought. The idea of becoming proficient enough in English to actually teach it was both thrilling and intimidating. Could I really reach that level of fluency one day? Miss Emma seemed to read my momentary trepidation. With a knowing look and a gentle hand on my arm, she said, "Just continue being patient with yourself, Nadia. This language journey is a marathon, not a sprint. As long as you keep putting in the daily effort, your skills will continue blossoming before you know it." I nodded slowly, letting her sage wisdom sink in. She was right. I had already come such an incredibly long way from those first terrifying days, trying to wrap my tongue around strange new sounds and vocab. If I stayed committed and kept putting in the work, who knew how much higher I could soar? You're absolutely right, Miss Emma. Obrigada for the motivation. I switched briefly to Portuguese to express my sincere gratitude for her mentorship and guidance over the years. With a warm embrace and promises to keep working hard, we parted ways. I turned back to the concrete trough with a revitalized spirit. Okay, now I need to thoroughly rinse each item to get all the soap residue out, I narrated out loud, working the sodden fabric through the fresh well water. Rinsing, check for any missed stains that may still need extra attention. As I methodically made my way through the piles of rinsed laundry, wringing out each item and dropping it into the basket for hanging, I kept up my determined English stream of consciousness. By the time I'd finished, I was able to put together lengthy sentences effortlessly, describing the entire multi-step process from start to finish fluently. I couldn't stop the proud grin that spread across my face as I gathered up the heavy basket of wet, clean laundry. In that moment, Miss Emma's words resonated fully. I truly was on a language marathon. And while I may not have reached the proficiency finish line yet, I had traveled an incredibly arduous and ultimately rewarding journey from my English starting line. My dedication through constant practice, willingness to learn from mistakes, and immersing myself in every conversational opportunity available had transformed me from a terrified young girl of 14, struggling with those first strange vowel sounds, into a confident English speaker who could articulately narrate entire processes out loud. As I carefully hung each damp item over the tight clotheslines strung between the mango trees in our compound, I made a quiet vow to myself to never stop pushing my English abilities onward and upward from here. Whether it was landing a job as a translator, guide, or teacher myself someday, I knew this incredible gift of English fluency was my passport to a brighter future beyond our tiny village. Grabbing the last sun-warmed towel off the line, I shook it out with a satisfying snap and murmured the final lines of my laundry narration under my breath. And that's how you wash clothes, ... in English.